So I have to point out a milestone that's happening up here right now, which is that the choir is on the chancel. Did anyone notice that? The choir is on the chancel. The choir has not been on the chancel in 2 years and 8 months and some days, I'm sure, but who's counting? It's just a deep joy. Thank you, choir. Yeah. And thanks, too, to the Prudential team who made this possible by removing some of the pews that were up here. Thank you for doing that. Friends, please pray with me. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. You are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So the book of Micah is not one that we get to preach on very much, or if we do, it's really kind of one little part that we pick out. We really kind of cherry pick it out. It's perhaps the crown jewel of the book of Micah, and we'll get to that one at the end. If you know anything, you probably know about it, the doing justice, loving kindness, walking humbly. But we miss some things about even the power of that message if we don't understand the larger backdrop behind Micah. Micah is really, try to imagine it as if it were a play in 3 acts, and that the backdrop of this play is this thing called Zionist theology. So a little primer on Zionist theology. You see, in the Near Eastern ancient world, Zionist theology went beyond the belief that Israel had an exclusive right to the land that God had promised them. It went beyond that to actually include a belief that they were invulnerable, that nothing could hurt them because God was with them. This is perhaps best summed up by Psalm 46, which says, "God is in the city and it cannot be moved." So this belief therefore emboldened the leaders and the priests to feel over time like they were above accountability, and leading some of them to become much more concerned with their own power and their own accumulation of power than they were with serving the people that they were there to serve. Somehow, over time, they had gotten away from their core principles, a la the Torah, that emphasize the common good and condemn oppression. And Micah was calling them on this in a big way. Their practices and policies were taking advantage of the most vulnerable, and they were leaving widows and orphans homeless. And Micah did not mince words. There were also at this time what we would probably call false prophets who were also speaking in a Micah-like way in this day, and they tried to curtail Micah from saying these things. They tried to get him to calm down a little bit, to stop saying that everything was just so dire. It's like they were saying, Micah, you're being a little dramatic. I mean, is it really that big of a deal? These other prophets, they told the rulers and the priests what they wanted to hear, that nothing could happen to Israel ever because God. Clearly, they were immune to anything that might harm them. But Micah doubles down and he gets more specific. From the 3rd chapter, he says, Jerusalem's leaders administer justice for bribes. Her priests give rulings for a fee, and her prophets predict the future for pay. Now, all of these things should have been free. These cost nothing. These were simply their duties. And he goes on to say, and they rely on God, saying, "Isn't the Lord in our midst? No disaster will come on us." But Micah kept on piercing holes in their belief that they were above consequences for their actions. He was shooting down any idea that they ultimately wouldn't have to worry about it. Micah tells it like it is, and he says, "Therefore, because of you, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem will become heaps of ruins." Scene 1 of Micah ends. Scene 2 of Micah opens some 150 to 200 years later, and this time what Micah predicted had indeed come true. The assumptions that the rulers had had way back when, well, they came down with really big consequences on the shoulders of their descendants. Judah had indeed been sacked, and the best and brightest of the southern kingdom of Israel were taken away into exile in Babylon. They would end up being there for 70 years if they lived that long. The language of the second Micah prophet is one of comfort and tenderness then, because that is what the people need. He promises that even though they've lost everything that ever mattered to them, God would indeed restore them again. Scene 2 of Micah ends. Scene 3 opens. This scene opens with Israel personified as a voice of one who realizes that they have messed it all up. They see their transgression and likely the faults of all those who came before them. They see the generational effect of this, and they so badly want to make it right. They want a redo. Anyone ever wanted a redo? What can I do, they ask. Just tell me and I'll do it. Should I bring the very best offerings possible? Year-old calves? How about 1,000 rams or 10,000 rivers of oil? No? Okay. What about my firstborn? Take the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? And now Micah speaks again and says, you already know what you need to do. God has already told you, and it is never changed, ever. It is simply these 3 things. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. Scene 3 of Micah ends, and the curtain falls. Friends, if we ever had any illusion that we can only have a private faith that doesn't impact how we treat others, that doesn't change and challenge our values, well, Micah makes it clear that that's not how it works. If I were to take out the names and references to places from scene 1, which I did just a little bit ago, if I were to take out those specific names and places, what or who do you think I might be talking about? I could read headlines from the last however many years now and change a few names and places, but this sounds pretty familiar. Perhaps feeling as if a country is above its consequences or would always be protected. And then there's the third scene, and we, like the speaker in the third scene, wonder too, what can we do? And it is the same answer now as it was then, as it has always been. And it's this trinity, again, of Micah 6:8, of doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God. And this is the cherry-picked part of Micah that we sort of hold up because it's shiny. But all types of Christians point to Micah 6:8, but in different ways, if you'll notice. Sometimes the challenge for more theologically conservative Christians when it comes to Micah 6:8 is to move beyond just letting justice and kindness and walking humbly, moving beyond that just being about their personal relationship with God, and actually letting it impact how they view the world and others and how they interact with the systems of the world, and perhaps even how they choose their leaders. Whereas the challenge for sometimes more theologically progressive Christians is the inverse, to not primarily see Micah 6:8 as relevant for the larger world, the systems, or our values as a society and how these play out, but sometimes to also see justice, loving kindness, and humility as a state of our own hearts that we are invited to cultivate. We cannot advocate for justice and then not nurture loving kindness in our own lives with the people around us. And we don't get a ticket to claim a blind rightness about everything all the time. To walk in humility with God always means that we are willing to learn, that we are willing to be students and maybe realize we don't know everything all the time. Micah 6:8, for some of us, can be a path towards a deeper discipleship. And then the gift of Micah 6:8, and whatever times and places, especially when it all feels so big and overwhelming, and certainly it has for some time now, the gift of it is that it gives us something to do. It gives us something that we can be in control of. because there's a whole lot we're not. So we do justice in the ways that we can. While we as a church, we work really hard for big systemic change in the world, really hard, and we do a really good job of that. I'm always so proud of you. We can also do that in our daily lives, in our personal lives with those around us. We can help make the world a little bit better for those in our lives. We can love kindness, not just theoretically, but in practice. The more we practice kindness, the bigger that muscle becomes. Another word here that translators use, which here is used kindness, is sometimes mercy. And that may fit us a little bit better, to love mercy. Where in our lives can we choose mercy? Friends, any time you choose mercy, you will not just change something for someone else, but also for yourself. Choosing mercy is a spiritual superfood, perhaps one of the most distinctive marks of the Christian. And we can walk humbly, and it's hard to do, especially in these days of heated rhetoric. It is hard to do, but to walk humbly means that we remember it is not all up to us, that we don't actually have to know everything. And while we will always work for broader change in the world that aligns with our lived faith, we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. Humility in the end means remembering that we are indeed mere mortals, which is why perhaps the prophet uses that word. God has shown you, O mortal. You already know what to do. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly, and put that on repeat, and on repeat, and on repeat. Amen.